Sup y'all? This is going to be a super beginner's guide to making a custom cutscene using the SkyTemple PMD Explorers of Sky hacking tool. For this video, I'm using beta build 0.1.0A11. And the reason why I know this is a super beginner's guide is because I basically am one myself. I started working on this scene about a month ago on the weekends, and prior to that I had no knowledge of how PMD scripts work. I have no computer science background, no programming language knowledge, not even a history with video game modding aside from fiddling with some 3rd gen Pokemon tools a long time ago, and I'm talking the super basic ones like advanced text. So if this background seems familiar, this is the tutorial for you. I'm going to first show the whole scene, then walk through each individual part that went into the process of making the scene. Timestamps are in the description since I imagine you'll want to skip around. There's a lot that just happened during that sequence, but the first question I will present is, how did I even find out what script to edit in order to modify the sequence when you load up Waterfall Cave? Right now, I'm at the SkyTemple homepage, which is the first thing you see after loading up your ROM. I'm going to access the script editor by going to the top right and loading it up. There's some other ways that you can do it, but that's the fastest. From here, there's a couple ways you can proceed and shortcuts you can take that are out of the scope of this video, but I'll just go through the method that will probably make the most sense to people that are unfamiliar with SkyTemple. This starts with using the built-in SkyTemple emulator's debug mode. Make sure that enabled debugging mode is checked. I turn off draw entity debug overlay. That can be helpful if you're looking for specific things though. Go ahead and bind your controls in the emulator menu and boot up the game. I'm going to keep the sound off just because it's very loud and I want to make sure that my voice can be heard. So once at the start screen, select New Game. Then, once this loads up, select No to access the Scenario Select menu. There's a decent amount of stuff that you can do in here, and I would recommend watching Paracoopa's video on debugging for more information. That will be linked in the description. But on the topic of looking for the script that starts a certain scene, the first thing that you want to do is make a save state at this menu. This list here is basically a set of checkpoints that load you in with the default team at a certain point in the game. I'll just pick a random scenario, main 13. As you can see, main 13 actually loads up chapter 11, not chapter 13. This is one reason why I recommend to make a save state, so that you can, especially early on, just be able to go back to this menu and try again without sitting through the startup screen, which can take a while. Waterfall Cave is in chapter 5, which is pulled by main 5. Unfortunately, the next step here is that I need to play through the game until I get to the trigger for the scene I'm trying to identify. You do get 3 save states within the emulator, however, after reloading a save state a certain amount of times, the emulator will begin to have issues such as corrupted audio, among other things, that will necessitate you hard resetting and going through the scenario select again, instead of recalling previous RAM by loading a save state. Or at least I'm pretty sure that's how it works. I could be wrong on the details. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that one. I just skipped forward to right outside the mission select. Now it's time to start paying attention to the debug log at the bottom. So let me make that a little bigger. And as you can see, there's 4 checkboxes that you can enable for various detail, though for isolated script-related things, I like to only keep script debug and engine events on. This also happens to be SkyTemple's default, which is pretty nice. Now, it's time to load up the Secret Waterfall story mission. Actually, let me save state first, can never be too careful. And then run over here. Now load it up. Okay, I just paused at the start of the scene here so that I could see what happened in the debug log to lead to this script being loaded. I think a good place to start most of the time, if you don't know what's going on, is with the debug print items. The first that was pulled here being go to scenario dungeon. So going through this afterwards line by line for some context, ground quit is referring to you leaving basically the map of Treasure Town, right? That area of the map that I was in. I left that to go select a mission. The overworld that you roam around in is referred to as ground. So, Treasure Town, ground quit, but there needs to be a new ground start. In order to determine what the new ground start is, the game references script common unionall.ssb. So let me load that up. As you can see, script, I am in the script browser here, common unionall.ssb. So upon loading this up, the first thing I want to point out is that unionall.ssb is gigantic. And I'm not going to pretend that I totally understand what's going on here, because there's a lot. But essentially this is where the bulk of the game runs, and it acts like a giant decision tree to pull various scripts. For my Excel people out there, think of this as like 5 million nested if statements. It's ridiculous. But again, for a more detailed dive into this topic, I would recommend Paracupa's video on changing game modes, which heavily involves unionall.ssb. That will also be linked in the description. As for these debug prints, I think the best way to try and figure out what's happening is to find where in unionall.ssb that particular debug print lies. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to skip to the most recent debug print in our log, because we're trying to find the last thing that just loaded, right? So we're going to go to the most recent debug log, which is enter scenario dungeon. So look that up. Enter scenario dungeon. If I can type, that's always helpful. You have to hit down a bunch of times usually. For some reason, it's weird. Yeah, but you can see I now got to the correct spot. Enter scenario dungeon. Again, this is our last debug print in this sequence, because all three of these debug prints came up when I loaded up Waterfall Cave, right? Go to Scenario Dungeon, which went to Move World Map, which went to Enter Scenario Dungeon. So there has to be something within here that leads us either directly to the script that was loaded or to our next spot inside unionall.ssb. Luckily, there's a key term here that seems to line up with our situation. This MO5, which is short for main 5, and if you remember, main 5 is what we loaded to get to this sequence in the game. And if I scroll down through the rest of Enter Scenario Dungeon, you'll notice that there isn't any other MO5 anywhere aside from at these two spots. So let's first check out Coro event MO503. Event 0503. By the way, when there's this Coro in front of it and you want to look stuff up inside unionall SSB, usually you want to leave that out. I could be here forever scrolling. I know where it is, so I'll just go there. My word. I say as I botch it. There we go. See, the highlight helps you out. Still helpful to Control F it. So right here, we reach the jackpot, which is the event bank. This is where multiple scripts are compiled together to form one continuous scene. If you look at the very bottom of the debug log, past Enter Scenario Dungeon, there are 4 scripts being loaded. Long story short, you only need to worry about this last one for now with the .ssb suffix, because the .ssb is the actual cutscene script that is being shown and being played currently. And wouldn't you know, MO5A0301 shows up right here inside this supervision execute acting sub. Since it's the start of this event, that means that ending script MO5A0301 will eventually start MO5D0314, etc., until the event ends and the game transitions back to giving the player control. For those of you following along at home with your own SkyTemple and vanilla Explorers of Sky, you might have noticed that MO503 should contain 2 additional scripts inside this sequence. These 2 scripts were for the beginning and ending of the dimensional screen transition, but I deleted both of these from event MO503. Note that this doesn't delete those scripts from the game's data, only from this particular event. Scripts can be reused in multiple events throughout the game by copying this supervision execute acting sub, as is the case with the dimensional screen and vanilla Explorers of Sky, because you know that appears multiple times throughout the game, right? That's just the same script being repurposed in multiple events. Or alternatively, a script can be in the game and just not be used at all if it's never called anywhere within unionall.ssb. Now we are finally ready to dig into MO5 AO301.ssb. The first thing I'm going to do is make a breakpoint here at line 22. Basically, this will make the emulator automatically stop before executing the line that the breakpoint is set at. This is really helpful for trying to isolate certain parts of a script and figure out what's happening. Let me just play. And as you can see, it stopped. So first, we have define 0. You need this at the start of every script. Sound stop. This is in case the previous script or ground didn't already get rid of the sound before calling this script. But as you'll see later on, scripts within an event tend to stop the sound at the end of that script, so sound stop ends up being unnecessary in that case. Back set ground, I will get more into this later, but basically this calls the background that the scene takes place in. Next is supervision acting. As far as I can tell, you always have to have this supervision acting with performer 0 camera set myself in order to get the camera to work. Supervision acting 0, again, going to get more into that later. Don't worry about it right now. Just know that you need it. As for the camera set myself, I haven't messed around with this too much, but it seems like this command unlocks camera functionality in the rest of the script. I've tried to get rid of this, and being able to do anything with the camera seems like it's not possible. So I'm guessing that's what it does. Luckily, as is the case with way more than you would think in SkyTemple, you can just copy and paste this whole sequence into another script, and it works fine without really messing with anything, so long as you do this camera set myself before setting the camera position in that script. Next is BGM play fade in. Something cool here that I noticed is that in the previous public build of SkyTemple that I was using, this just listed the BGM ID as numbers instead of saying rain 2. So definitely cool to see that this stuff is being streamlined as updates come along. Anyways, this command has BGM ID, duration, and again, really cool that it lists this out in SkyTemple. This is also something that they've been updating over time. And volume. I'm guessing the duration is in frames, and volume is most likely a linear scale topping out at 256, since not only was this 256 already present in the vanilla script and it's unchanged, but 256 is also 16 times 16, so it makes sense for that to be the cap. As for BGM ID, you can start typing the command. If I go to there, and there's these really helpful autofill suggestions that you can see that spare you the time of looking up all the possible BGM IDs in the game in a separate window and like looking over on your other monitor, or God forbid you have one monitor, you have to Alt-Tab 25 times, because they're all just right here. It's an amazing feature, and you can do this for any text string with this same color text. In my case, it's yellow since I'm using Cobalt View. Let me bring that back to rain 2. And for that color scheme view, color scheme cobalt. Cobalt's what I'm using. I just like it because there's a lot of color contrast. Use whatever you want, but I might fall into the habit of, of using colors that only make sense under cobalt. Next we have screen fade in. Takes 30 frames to complete, then wait 90 frames, and then this set of with commands. So even though it says with, it actually waits for the execution of the previous command before starting. So instead of a with being with the execution of a previous line, it's with the ending of a previous line, if that makes sense. However, once a with string is started, these three withs all happen at the same time. In addition, not every command can be a with. It seems to be only commands that change the properties of an entity inside the scene. Entity being performer in this instance, actor in this instance. First you have performer 0, which, as you may have been able to guess from before, is referring to the camera. It is moving its position from its default, which is at the top of the waterfall, to where you can see it right now at 31.5 on the x-axis and 28 on the y-axis. One thing to keep in mind in Explorers of Sky is that the y-axis starts at the top and goes further down as units increase. Why? I have no idea, but that's just how it is. Meanwhile, the actors, defined as actor player and actor attendant 1, aka the partner, are moving to their spots as well. As for the position M0, M1, M2, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I do know that each position needs to be its own unique variable within that script. So I could change this to M10, M11, M12, and as far as I can tell, it makes no difference. And this 1, no idea what that's for, but you need it or the command won't function. As for why you have to specify the entity actor here and then also have actor player, because it might seem redundant, this is because it is possible to manipulate things other than actors with this command. So let me explain this. Bring up the SkyTemple main page and go to script scenes, and remember from earlier that this script is pulled from scene D04 P11A. Now I'm at the script scene editor. Let's see, we're on 301, right? Yeah. But for now, I'm just going to show that while in here, you can add actors, objects, performers, and triggers. So those are all your options to classify the entity that you are selecting within that command. Back to the script. We are finally going to end this first sequence with WaitExecuteLives actor player, which is to say the script will not continue until actor player finishes their with. Finally, after this, we have our first dialog box. It starts with message set face with the actor whose portrait is shown on screen, the face they make, and where the portrait is located on the screen. The face ID comes from inside the main SkyTemple page. From here, going to close that out, go to Pokemon, select one. I'm going to do Bulbasaur just because it's the first one. Let it load and go to portraits. As you can see, ID 0 is your standard face. Every mon has one. However, for this command, pulling up, for example, if I wanted to pull up happy, right, I would not type 2 here instead of 0. I would type 1, and the reason why is because all of these flip versions are actually skipped over in this command. So another way to think about it is just divide whatever this number is by 2, and then you get what you're supposed to put into a command. And as you can see here, there's kind of an explanation for that. Flip versions of the images are unused, ? Because the game flips the portraits itself. Yes, flipping the portraits is actually its own command. Not really going over that over the course of this video, but it is a thing that you can do. So next is message switch talk, partner talk kind. Partner talk kind means that the dialog box will pull up the partner's name as the one saying it. Then we have text for case 1, case 2, and default. Not sure what causes the different cases, but I believe it has to do with what species the partner is. A couple things within each text string. First off, you need this space after the opening quotation, because without it, the game will not put a space after the colon following the partner's name. If it seems like a big oversight, I agree, but you have to do it. The backslash before an apostrophe in that is because apostrophes don't play very nicely inside these little text strings here. So in order to make it work, the backslash needs to be there before any apostrophe that is just showing up as plain text. And then this /n denotes a line break. You do have to manually set the line breaks every time because the game has no built-in text wrapping, which sucks. And you kind of just have to check it every time. There's some things that can help you out that you learn over time as you keep making these text boxes, but you pretty much just need to check it every time. Then there's Coro message close wait function, which pretty much does what it says. Requires the player to close the message box before the script proceeds. Then once it's closed, there is a standardized wait. Basically, just put this at the end of every dialog box, transitioning to something that isn't another dialog box from the same actor, face, and face position. Now, I'm going to make another breakpoint at line 77 to talk about this next part. For new commands, we have SEPlay, and again, I have sound off, so sorry about that, but it makes this video much easier to make. So sorry about that again. This calls a sound effect ID, though there is not a lookup built into SkyTemple as of now for SEPlay. The SkyTemple Discord has a table of all of the SEPlay IDs that you can use. The screen then whites out for 3 frames, waits 2, then fades back in for 3. Attendant 1 has an effect set around them, then starts an animation, then slides back from the waterfall to their original position. SlidePositionMark is different from MovePositionMark because they aren't walking when they go from the waterfall back to here. They're moving like the sprite is moving, right? The character sprite is moving, but they're not pulling the walking animation, and they're still facing the same way as they're sliding back. Not sure what this first number is, but once again, you have to have it. You can just copy it. It's not a big deal. At the same time, the player has this shocked effect set and turns to direction_left. Again, I don't know what these numbers are for. After this, it's a lot of repeating commands we already know up until about line 353. So that is our next break. Let's see, there it is, 353. Hit play. Okay, so I just realized that I probably should touch on this message switch monologue around line 143 here. This is the text command for when the player is talking. you still need to set your face like before, and again, set to actor player this time. And this time there's case 4 in default. Again, not sure on the difference, most likely has to do with these species. But what's nice is that you don't need to add a space at the start of a text for a monologue, since there's no player name and the colon after the player name inside the dialog box during a switch monologue. In addition, this K here denotes a spot where the text stops scrolling and you need to confirm, so press the touch screen or press A and B to continue on and play out the rest of the text box. Also, notice that in between these, there is no close wait function or set face between dialog boxes because it's not necessary. Nothing is changing between both text boxes, right? It's the same actor player, same face position. So you can just go straight into the next switch monologue and you don't have to input those other two before. Now for that next breakpoint. Okay. First off, this text box, this last text box, hero, this pulls the text string for the player name. There are two other similar dialog pulls that I know of, which are partner for the partner name and team with a colon for the team name, both of which are used again later on in this event in a later script. Then we have message close, which is just close wait function but without the wait. Then we have, let's see, BGM fade out and screen fade out. Just like they both had fade ins, they also have fade outs. Then a wait. This is just when the screen went black. Do the little loading screen fake out type deal. Then, while the screen is faded out, the whole beginning of the script is basically repeated. The BGM play fade in again. Except these direction ups are added for actor player and actor attendant 1. This is necessary because SetPositionMark changes the location of the actor without them actually moving, like physically moving, walking. Since the actor's last movement was walking downward to the bottom of the screen, they would still be facing down after a set position mark, hence the turn to direction up to fix that. And with a scroll down through the rest, we can see that is pretty much it. Another BGM fade out, screen fade out, and then end, which returns the game to union.ssb, which, as we know, is going to redirect us to mo5do314.ssb. Here we are at mo5do314.ssb. There's not nearly as much to go over here, since a lot of it is repeat material, but if you may recall, this script actually takes place inside Wigglytuff's guild, despite being a part of the Waterfall Cave intro event. How is this possible? Well, it starts with backset ground. Remember how in the last script I said I would talk about that later? Now is the time. For this script, the command is backset ground level G01P04A. Recall that backset ground determines the background during the scene. However, in unionall.ssb event MO503, it suggests that the map used is D04P11A, which was also the level within event MO503 and the backset ground as well. If I can pull that up. Yeah, there. For the previous script. So what's going on? The explanation for this is that the level in execute acting sub does not pull a background, it pulls a script scene. These are two separate things. So let's go back to the SkyTemple main page for a second. And first, I'm going to look under map backgrounds. This is where backset ground pulls from. Now, if I scroll down to G01P04A, Would you look at that? That is exactly what I'm looking for. And out of curiosity, DO4P11A is indeed Waterfall Cave. So this lines up with the last script, and it's probably easier to just do that. And GO1PO4A, yes, I did have to look it up again. That is the background that I was looking for to have the guild's bottom floor. So as for how I figured out GO1PO4A is what I was looking for, I just used a debugger, kind of like before, to find a script that was using this background. That is definitely a good way. There's also some patterns with the naming sequence that can help for dungeons specifically, since that's so huge, it's hard to just like brute force go through all these. Like for example, DO4P11A. DO4 stands for Dungeon 4, the 4th dungeon sequence in the game, which is different from just dungeon count, right? Because the game counts like boss floors as their own dungeon, essentially. But the 4th dungeon sequence in the game, you have Beach Cave, Drench Bluff, Mount Bristle, and then Waterfall Cave. So Waterfall Cave is probably DO4. Then you can double click and check if you're correct, and boom, Waterfall Cave background. Now, let's look at script scenes. Since event MO503 pulls from the script scene bank, recall that the scene we're looking for is still DO4P11A. There it is. And within here is MO5DO314.SSA. Remember how in the debug log, it shows that you need an SSA to pull an SSB? Well, this is the SSA, an acting scene. You can see that the background here is still Waterfall Cave, but for the purposes of the script, this doesn't really mean anything. The background is just nice for helping you correctly position the elements that you add to the scene, because where you place these elements is their default set position mark. Of course, this isn't really relevant for this script since an entirely different background is being used. However, I still needed to make a change in this SSA by adding a new actor for Chatot. Without adding the actor into the SSA, there is no data to be pulled if that actor is referenced in the SSB. So let me just plop down an actor here to show how it works. That is object actor. Sector seems to refer to the layer of the map that the actor is in. I haven't really messed around with this too much. This will come up in a later script, however. So that'll be talked about again. Let's see. Talk script just lets you pull from a list of scripts to assign to that actor. However, in a .ssa, because it is an acting scene, you can only have one SSB. I don't know why this is. It's just a rule that the game has, so can't really use talk scripts in this instance. Direction is where they're facing by default, so it helps to make sure this is correct so that you don't need to use an additional turn to direction inside the script. Of course, with the way that I went about making this scene, I had to do a turn to direction anyways, because I just copied and pasted so that they walked over to their position instead of set position. Kind is the type of actor that you're using. I haven't dug into this too much, so I'm not sure if every Pokemon in the game has their own actor, but there's a lot. And you'll see there's a lot of repeats here. Like, for example, there's like a Dialga, a Primal Dialga, there's a Wigglytuff, Silhouette, you know, etc. There's about 5 million test ones that you just saw going through there. But yeah, there's a lot to pick from, and it's worth noting that this menu uses the Pokemon's Japanese names when you're trying to look them up. So if you if you are wondering what the heck is going on, hopefully that helps you a little bit. So now, armed with all this knowledge on backgrounds and script scenes, we return to the script view for MO5DO314. Back set ground for, oh, whoops, I'm in the wrong one. Back set ground for Wigglytuff's guild bottom floor. The camera's all set up. And all these positions, like I said before, they were just copied from another script inside GL1 PO4A, where you're talking to Chatot, that I found using the debug log. Yeah, and again, mentioned this before, but instead of having this be MovePositionMark and turn to direction, you could just have this be SetPositionMark and have them facing the correct way in the SSA. As for the difference between MovePositionMark and MoveToPositionMark, I'm really not sure. It seems to function the exact same. Scrolling down a little, the other new thing here is Chatot's dialog box, which is different from the commands used for the player and partner. Message talk seems to be what you use for every character that's not those two. The name used in the dialog box is pulled from the data for that actor in message set phase. So NPC Parapu, their dialogue name in English just shows up as Chatot. And the rest of the commands here have already been discussed, already went over in the previous script, so that is it for this one. Now, onto MO5A0302.SSB. We're in the East Treasure Town background, and NPC Kinogasa, aka Breloom, was added to the script scene. At line 43, if I scroll down to that, there is an ExecuteCommon. This came up in the first script as well, but I wanted to save it for here to spread out the explanations a bit. Basically, ExecuteCommons are a combination of effects, animations, and waits that are standardized throughout the game for certain actions. This one, Explanation Func Series, is for when you're talking and kind of move in place instead of pulling up a dialog box to actually say the words. Not sure what the 0 afterwards is for. Again, a reminder that since this is yellow text, you can get autocomplete suggestions to see what the other ExecuteCommons are, which is super helpful. I will repeat once again. At line 160, which is right here, there's some new dialogue tools. This CSN and CR, whatever's inside that text is turned blue. For some reason, I sometimes had troubles with this one, trying to just type it out as normal, but copying and pasting a whole CSN CR string from another script and then changing the inside has always worked. I don't know if there's any reason or basis for this. It's definitely possible that I just typed it wrong, but in case that comes up for you, just know that you're not alone, and the solution is copy and paste, as it is for most of this game seemingly. Then we have the 3 text pools that I talked about during that first script, all appearing at once: partner, hero, and team. And remember again, team has a colon afterwards. Don't forget that. There's another text color changer for Spinda's Cafe here. CSK makes it green. The CR is still afterwards. Then there is Survey Team, which shows up in-game with quotation marks. Much like good old apostrophes, these can cause problems if you do not have this little slash here before the ending quotation. The ending quotation just straight up does not show up if you don't do this. At least I'm pretty sure that is what occurred. So, yeah. Basically, quotations and apostrophes have the same issue. And that is actually it for new stuff in this script. The next script is MO5A0303.SSB. I'm going to make a breakpoint at line 379 down here because I want to talk a little about this big movement sequence right here, and I think it's easier if you see what is happening first, so let me play it. All right, so we finally reached a breakpoint. I might cut out almost all of that because that was longer than I remember. But anyways, first, performer 0 and attendant 1, which is the partner, remember, are both moving position offset by 0 on the x-axis and 40 on the y-axis. Notice that this is different from MovePositionMark. MovePositionMark determines a new exact XY coordinate to move to, while MovePositionOffset is saying to move a certain amount of units from the current location. In this case, it's 40 units straight down. Then both the player and Breloom turn to direction down left and wait until the partner finishes their MovePositionOffset and turns to direction up. Then the player starts their offset and turn to direction, and then Breloom follows. Interestingly, even though there's no WaitExecuteLives for actor player here, the player still goes through their whole MovePositionOffset before Breloom starts his. And the only explanation I can think of is that two actor MovePositionOffsets can't occur at the same time, maybe? Because otherwise they should both be moving at the same time, as they are in the same width string. And none of the width strings are broken because they're all executing, so I don't know. That's the only explanation I can think of. Again, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. Then we have these slide position offsets that make up, by the way, all of this, that all just makes up the partner's nervous shaking animation. Slide position offset, much like the previous slide command discussed earlier, is different from move because it doesn't involve the walking animation and it is quicker. However, the format for this command seems to be different from move position offset since the partner is moving in two different directions on the x-axis, but this is noted not by x equals 1 and x equals minus 1, but it's x equals 1 and x equals 32767. Again, I'm not sure how that works, but copying and pasting this into another script works fine to replicate this animation. Now, for the actual jump into the waterfall at line 531, if I can find that. Yeah. So this part utilizes multiple layers inside a script scene. Let me go to M05A0303.SSA. We're in DL4P12 now, by the way. Oh no, actually we aren't yet. That's a lie. That's a lie. 303. Yes. As you can see, this script scene is showing these 3 water splashes, but they aren't visible for most of the script. How does this work? Well, if you look in the top right, you can see that there is Sector 0 with 3 actors and 1 performer, and Sector 1 with 3 objects. Sector 0 is what we are in at the start of every script. And you can tell this since that 1 performer is the camera, right? What is the first thing that happens at the start of every script? Enable the camera. You can also double check by clicking on one of the splashes, and you can see they are indeed in Sector 1. Now returning to the script view. There's this ResetOutputAttribute that is applied to every actor. This seems weird to me since there wasn't any output attribute set in the first place that's explicitly stated in the script, but this seems to be necessary in order for where is it? Object DO4 P11A1_18 to have its own output attribute set. I'm guessing this output attribute performs the splash animation. Another interesting part of this command is that one call for this object performs the same action for all 3 objects that have the same name. Because if you go back to this, there's 1 splash for each of them, right? But only 1 command here that works for all 3. Very interesting. Then, after this, the 3 actors disappear / are removed from the scene with the destroy command. But don't forget here that you need to have this supervision acting 1 that allows you to play around with object do4p11a 1_18 because it is in sector 1. And that's all for new stuff in this script. Now we have finally reached the last script of event MO503, MO5AO304.SSB. Most of this segment is going to be about the very end, but first I would like to bring up a point about set animation with certain actors since it's relevant for this part. I made a breakpoint at line 56, and I'm just going to let this play out. Okay, so notice how these first 3 commands are to set animation 65 for all 3 actors. The player and partners start to stumble around, but Breloom just does his normal walk cycle. Unfortunately, not every actor has every animation assigned to them. An infamous example of this is how anyone that isn't a starter Pokemon doesn't have an overworld sleeping animation, so you're just standing in your bed as you wake up. It's the same idea here. Since Breloom does not have an animation 65, he does what is probably his default animation 0 or 1, which is his walk cycle. Just something to look out for when you're implementing new actors. Something to keep in mind. Now, for the very end. Let me scroll this way. Again, I'm going to suggest that you watch Paracoopa's video on switching game modes for more detail, because I'm going to assume that you have a baseline knowledge of how these last few lines work, and that video can provide that. So, main entered dungeon has been changed from 6, which is Waterfall Cave, to 9, which is Side Path, aka the not Craggy Coast, right? So as you might imagine, this means since the game still pulled up Waterfall Cave first floor after the script edited and it transitioned to gameplay, this must mean that Side Path was actually edited to look like Waterfall Cave. And you would be correct. I won't go too deep into the details here for the sake of video scope, but the SkyTemple beta has functionality for editing dungeon properties, and you can see, change this to Waterfall Cave, and you have the different floors and whatever. Yeah, it's all pretty cool. Definitely, I think, very user-friendly. And I edited some text strings related to dungeons as well. You scroll here near the bottom, then you get dungeon names, dungeon names, dungeon names, dungeon names. I just change all of them because whatever. But this leaves one mystery, which is, why would I even do this and change the dungeon that is entered if I'm just going through Waterfall Cave, quote unquote, anyways? Well, as of now, it is understood that adding a guest party member to your team is a functionality that is actually hard-coded to only certain dungeons. So, to make Breloom my guest, I had to overwrite Bidoof's data for Side Path using a hex editor. That is definitely more complex than everything discussed so far, and probably would warrant its own video to explain. Let me know if there's any interest for that. I could definitely provide that type of video, but you know, again, it would put a decent amount of effort to explain all that. But just let me know if there's any interest. However, this isn't the end, because making Side Path the new dungeon also means that it is the new reference point for UnionAll.SSB. In other words, at the end of Side Path's end script will be played, not Waterfall Cave's end script. Luckily, this can be changed. Using the debug log, I figured out that completing Side Path takes you to Get Out Scenario Dungeon. Get Out Scenario Dungeon. Where is it? You got to hit down, 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 down a bunch of times. There we go. Then, after that, the next label was label D009 clear, which is right here. Then, label D009 clear first. And then at the end of this script, you can see that there's this jump common for an event. In vanilla Explorers of Sky, this is the event for clearing side path, but instead I redirected it to the event for clearing waterfall cave. I also added in dungeon mode 6 equals D mode open and request. Again, watch that Paracupa video, but this basically makes it so the original waterfall cave no longer has the first time visit flag set. Since you're leaving side path now, the game does not automatically do this and you have to add this in. Out of curiosity, if you scroll up here, waterfall cave is most likely case 6, because afterwards you have dungeon mode 6 equals D mode open and request. So that's where it would normally occur if you're correctly leaving waterfall cave. It jumps to the same spot, and then you have, again, the same jump common. And with that, the modified event has been successfully implemented. I hope this video has been both in-depth enough and not too overwhelming for people out there brand new to SkyTemple, and I would love to see some large-scale creations come out of this thing. I know I'm working on one personally. Links to all the videos mentioned before are in the description, as well as a link to the SkyTemple Discord. Thanks for watching.